Welcome to Upfront. I'm Katie Hannon. It's clear from this weekend's Citizens' Assembly that we are at a crossroads on how the state treats people who use and abuse drugs. Tonight we debate the choices facing our communities. Shortly we'll hear from former addicts, Gillian O'Donnell, who was born into heroin addiction and lost almost everything to her own crack and cocaine habit, and a GA County player, Luke Loughlin, who battled his own cocaine addiction and says its use is rife in rural Ireland. Our panel tonight: Lynn Ruane left school at 15 but returned to education and worked in homeless and addiction services before being elected independent senator for Trinity College. She called on the government to urgently convene a Citizens' Assembly on drugs after her own bill to decriminalise the possession of drugs was postponed in 2017. Michael O'Sullivan is a former Assistant Commissioner of An Garda Síochána. He previously headed the Garda National Drugs and Organised Crime Bureau. He told the Citizens' Assembly that any relaxation of Ireland's drug laws will not work here because of the level of criminality, violence and viciousness in the drug trade. Dr. Ray Wally is a full-time GP and an Associated Clinical Professor at University College Dublin. He's a leading member of the Cannabis Risk Alliance, a group of doctors campaigning against the relaxation of the laws around cannabis use, which has warned that Ireland is sleepwalking into the legalisation of the drug. And Kieran O'Donnell is Fine Gael TD for Limerick City. A former finance spokesperson for Fine Gael, he is currently Minister for State with responsibility for local government and planning. He's a member of the Joint Policing Committee of Limerick City and County. The Citizens' Assembly on Drug Use has voted for a health-led approach to illegal drug use. This would mean that those found in possession of drugs like cannabis, cocaine and heroin for personal use are diverted to a health-led system rather than facing a drug conviction or prison. So basically, the possession of small quantities of illegal drugs would be decriminalised. Before we get to the debate on this, I want to get a snapshot of what's happening with drug use on the ground in Ireland now. And I'll go to you first, Eddie Darcy. You've been a youth worker for 40 years at this stage in Dublin. What have you seen? How have things changed with drug use across those years?
Well, I think the one undisputable fact at the moment is that drug use in Ireland is at its highest ever level. More people are using drugs now in Ireland than ever before. So existing approaches in terms of deterring people using drugs, particularly young people, just hasn't worked. So the drug of choice for most young people and young adults and older adults now has shifted maybe away from heroin, and now it's cannabis, weed and cocaine. And it's available in every village, in every town in Ireland. And they are the drugs of choice by thousands of people who are continuing to lead what appears to be reasonably normal lives. They're holding down a job, they're staying in college, they're attending school. I'm not saying that drugs don't harm people, don't harm families, don't harm communities. They do. But I think criminalising people who use it is just adding to the problem. And finally, it's created in Ireland, this whole drug gang culture that's out there that is really having very serious impact in certain communities. And despite the successes the Gardaí have in terms of seizures, it hasn't made any real impact on the amount of drugs available in communities. And we know that because the price has remained low and stays low.
And like the communities, the most disadvantaged communities, the most marginalised people, the image people have in their heads of people who are drug addicts and drug users, people injecting heroin. How is that now? Is that developing? Is it the same core people?
I think the vast majority of people who are watching TV tonight, their picture of a drug user will be somebody who's on the boardwalk maybe, or somebody who's hanging around the statue in, the junction of Abbey Street and O'Connell Street, or somebody maybe, unfortunately, from homeless services who are around the city centre. That cohort of people who became addicted to heroin in the early 90s or late 80s, and maybe are still addicted to various serious drugs, probably moved on to crack cocaine at this stage, and maybe meths or something else. They're there. But that doesn't represent the vast majority of people in Ireland who use drugs. They're people who are going to work in everywhere, RTE, the bank, the business, they're attending college, they're living what seems to be a fairly normal life, unless they run into problems around their debt. But I know from my own treatment centre, we do not have huge amounts of people coming and look for treatment around cannabis or around cocaine. Very quickly then, you are obviously, from what you're saying there, you are in favour of decriminalising the possession of drugs. I am in favour. In fact, I'm in favour of even going further, because I think my big fear about decrim is we are saying to people, we're no longer going to try and deter you from using drugs because it's a criminal offence, but however, you have to go and purchase your drugs from a drug gang. And I think there's something really morally wrong about that.
Okay, thanks for that, Eddie. Can I go to Sarah now? Sarah Cassidy, you're Head of Clinical Services with the Ashiri Addiction Treatment Services, based primarily in Tipperary. Give us a sense of the picture on the ground in rural Ireland.
So rural Ireland, we're seeing it's absolutely down every little boreen in rural Ireland currently. Addiction is absolutely ripe, and it's through every demographic. We're meeting in every group, all demographics. What we're noticing is that, you know, the increase in accessibility causes basically the increase in addiction, and that's widespread throughout the communities. It's horrendous because the old stigmas that have been attached to drug use have prevented a lot of people from coming forward until there's actually a crisis. So a mental health crisis or a suicide or attempt or something like that is, for example, encouraging a farming family to actually seek help, whereas we'd really love to see them seek help a great deal earlier.
What is the drug of choice for the people?
The drug of choice generally that's presenting is mainly cocaine, but with cannabis or weed being the gateway. So, but the cocaine causing massive problems. For example, young farmers, no difficulty up to the age of 18, gone through school, etc., and by the age of 24, 26, suicide attempts being pulled down out of barns by their mum. You know, it's absolutely horrendous. And then reaching us in treatment in crisis, family in crisis, farms in jeopardy. It's horrendous.
Because I know you have said before that drug dealers look on farms as ATMs, basically.
Exactly, that's exactly it. They're looking at the machinery, the land, the whole lot, and they're using them as ATMs because the farming families often feel concerned about even exposing their son or daughter as being somebody that has an addiction. So they're likely to just pay off the debts, try and save their farm, their property, the machinery. You know, it's cruel what's happening. And they are being seen as ATMs.
Having said all that, where do you stand then on the issue of decriminalising?
Well, you see, I very much come in Ashiri from a health perspective. You know, we're looking at the harms to young people. We have our adolescent unit in Kilkenny, and we're watching the harms of cannabis use to the mental health of these young people coming into treatment. It's chronic. And certainly throughout our adult services in Wexford and Tipperary, it's the mental health piece that's having such a detrimental effect on people. So we're really, from the health perspective, I welcome it being seen as a health issue. As far as we're concerned, it's an illness that a person has, progresses over time.
But on the decriminalisation issue itself?
I mean, the only benefit I would see as a true benefit is that the young people being saddled with a charge that can affect their entire life without being given a chance to get well and get treatment, I don't feel is fair.
Okay. So you're kind of torn on the issue itself. Thank you for that, Sarah. Appreciate that insight. Can I have a question then, Joan? Yes, Joan, you have a question here.
I'm just wondering why we should decriminalise drugs. And I have read the Citizens' Assembly recommendations, and they're trying to work it off the Portuguese model, you know, and I've just done some research on the Portuguese model, and when they started off in 01, there was 7.8 of the population using drugs. Then by 2022, it had increased to 12.8% of the population. And at the moment, there's a year's waiting list if you're caught with drugs to be seen to. So why decriminalise it? You know, why turn around if somebody has drugs and then send them into a hospital environment or a doctor's environment?
Okay. Well, look, I'll go to you first with that one, Lynn Ruan.
Yeah.
This was obviously the headline recommendation from the Citizens' Assembly, that we should move forward with a health-led approach and decriminalise.
Yeah, well, I think, I mean, when we look at the Portuguese model, because it has been in existence, I suppose, the longest and within Europe, any statistics you're going to see arise in when you first destigmatise. So when you begin to destigmatise any social issues, more people are going to feel like they can actually speak out about their drug use. Statistics become easier to avail of. But over time, what we have with the Portuguese model, we do have statistics on the statistics around 18 to 24-year-olds in terms of reduce in drug use, but also in terms of it's still being one of the lowest statistically in Europe in relation to intervention and support in terms of drug use. So the thing is, it's like we can go, why do we want to decriminalise? But then we really have to ask our question is, what's the alternative? The alternative is, like, even if you're, like, nobody wants to be on a wait list, like, you want people to have access. So with any model, you want to increase the impact of service provision across the continuum of care, from prevention to intervention to harm reduction to abstinence, whatever model it is that people will need at any given moment. But the other alternative is why would you want to put them in front of a judge? Because I know if it was my son or daughter or me or a family member or a large majority of my community over the years, which I've lost to addiction or drug use over the years, I don't want them in front of a judge. I don't want them in a police cell. So it's like we've these two options where you have prohibition, where, like, we leave people in prison with a lot of access to drugs in the prison system. So it doesn't actually reduce the intervention. So of course we don't want those long waiting lists. Of course we don't want to also see an increase in problematic drug use. But also not all drug use is problematic. So you are going to see national figures across any country rise in relation to its drug use once it becomes destigmatised.
Can I ask you, like, where we've seen this happen? Obviously, Portugal, there was a lot of enthusiasm for it initially. There are some concerns now being raised. I know the mayor of Porto has had some concerns about what's happening in his city. Look to America, we look to Portland in Oregon, a lot of problems there and a lot of issues. Right? You've been there, haven't you?
In fairness, Katie, if you look at Portland, right? So if you look statistically at Portland, that's only been introduced for 3 years. Right, so anybody who was against the introduction of decriminalisation, which is called Measure 110 in Portland, right, they have all come out, it's not working, it's failing. But actually, when you look at downtown Portland, the people that were on the street then are the same people now, but all of a sudden people are pointing at them now because all of a sudden they've become someone that they want to look at and say, this isn't working. But it's been 3 years, and sorry...
I do want to say, though, that the majority of politicians, Democrat and Republicans, in that city are now saying they want to reverse.
But after 1 year, they still hadn't actually given the investment into the implementation. They said that the regulated cannabis industry would provide a portion of funding into the Portland system. So what Ireland can thankfully learn when we look to our health-led system is that if you don't invest at the same time as you decriminalise, you are going to have a percentage gap in terms of who's receiving care and who's not receiving care. And to keep in mind, they also defunded the police at the same time that they actually introduced decrim. So there's loads of other complex issues in Portland. So it's not fair to kind of look at Portland, who's only introduced decrim in the last 3 years, and say that it's failing. There's a 45% gap in service provision that's needed in Portland compared to what's actually being provided.
Let me bring in Michael O'Sullivan. You were fighting the war on drugs for many, many years.
Do you know, I hate that phrase. It's a phrase from 1971 from the Nixon administration. To tackle the drug problem, it requires the strategy of having supply reduction, which is the police, health education, and health and rehabilitation and treatment. It requires all four. One is as important as the other. Without one, the other isn't working.
OK, can I bring you back, though, to Joan's question, because that's the key thing here.
I'm going to take that now in a second. I've just spent the last 4 years working in Lisbon. The Portuguese model came out in 2021. Sorry, it came out in 2001. And it came out in 2001 after they realised that you had to funnel addicts, dreadful expression, but people who you couldn't go locking up people who had an addiction, certainly a heroin addiction. And the reason it came about was because of the number of HIV deaths. So they came up with this Portuguese model in which, putting it from a street level perspective, if somebody's caught with 8 deals of heroin or 8 deals of coke or hash, the police give them a ticket. And they go along to a dissuasion committee, they go along to a solicitor, a social worker and a psychologist. And they give them advice. And then they walk off again. And when the policeman sees them down the street selling drugs again, he might give them a second ticket. But by the third time, he stops giving them the ticket. Go talk to the police and go ask them, does it work? They'll tell you it doesn't work. And even if it works in Portugal, and there are quite a number of people who will say it doesn't. It won't work here. Why won't it work here? You're comparing apples and oranges. The criminal networks we have, the criminals we have, somebody was saying there about possibly buying drugs not from criminals. You can't do that. The criminals control the drugs network. The people who sell drugs for them, they control them.
So are you saying, sorry, can I just be
Yes.
Are you saying we are uniquely unable to do this? There's something in the way our criminal gangs operate that makes it impossible for us to decriminalise?
I'm saying that the Portuguese model will not suit Irish society, certainly the Irish criminal networks. It barely suits Portugal. There are those in Portugal doesn't have the drug problem we have. They don't have the violence, they don't have the juvenile violence, they don't have the adult violence we have. They don't have people going around in feuds, killing people. They don't have this madness that the Irish society has. So, sorry, just to clarify that. What I'm saying is, believe it or not, and a lot of people don't see it, the Irish system works if it's resourced. We have a system since '77. Firstly, let me say...
Can I just put you one statistic from... No, and I really do need to put this statistic to you because I think it's probably one of the most important statistics we're going to have tonight. Last year, or in 2020, 806 people died here of drug-related deaths.
Sure.
Is that if we had 806 people died on the roads this year, we would say our road safety policies were an abject failure.
That's dreadful.
But you're saying our system works.
I'm saying our system is a good system, and I'm saying it works. It's not going to prevent every death, and perhaps Ray Wally can talk about the health aspect of it. I'm saying that 92% of the people in this country don't use drugs. 23,000 people are opiate users. 10,000 are on the treatment list. So what I'm saying is there's 8% of the country that don't use drugs. A large proportion, the last speaker spoke about it, a large proportion of the people here are people using drugs, are using coke. Why are they using coke? I'm not talking about people who are addicted. I'm talking about people who are going out socially at weekends and spending 40 euros on a bag of coke or 100 euros. Okay. At the end of the day, sending them to a health treatment option. These are people who probably earn more than the 3 people sitting behind a counter. So what I'm saying is these people know what they're doing, they're very conscious of what they're doing, they're very happy in their job, thank you very much.
And you think they should face the full rigours of the law?
It's the deterrent.
Okay.
But it's not a deterrent because you just said they're out doing cocaine every weekend.
They're out doing cocaine, and if they're caught, there is the 92% of people, there's a huge number of people, young people in particular, among that grouping, who won't use cocaine, won't use heroin.
Where's that statistic from, 92%?
The EMCDDA.
In Ireland?
No, the EMCDDA is...
I know the EMCDDA, but they're saying the Irish statistics are that 92% of people don't use drugs.
That's what they're saying.
From what communities? Because they're not getting stopped.
Sorry.
Right? But from what communities? You're saying it works, but who does it work for?
One question at a time. I'm telling you that the EMCDDA...
That is the official statistics. That is the official statistics.
Yeah, but who's the 8%?
I don't know. That's what they're saying.
They're the most vulnerable people in the country from communities like mine.
Wait, hold on. Let's hold on a second. The communities, if you look at the cocaine, the scale that cocaine has gone up. When this country has a lot of disposable income.
Can I just bring in Ray Wally in this? Because you're probably closer to this than a lot of us in terms of the usage of drugs. What's your sense of it?
Well, my background is I went to school in the North Inner City, primary and secondary. I worked in the Mater Hospital in the late 80s during the heroin epidemic, worked for the last 3-4 decades in deprivation general practice, and I would be involved with obviously dealing with drugs, but also dealing with general sort of medicine as well. A couple of things there. A lot of your 800 there, the significant death rate is due to alcohol. Okay. Other things are, where I get frustrated with this is we're focusing on decriminalisation, we're focusing on legislation. Whereas where I am delighted with what has happened with the Citizens' Assembly is we've thrown a light on this issue. Hitherto...
Where do you stand on decriminalisation, though?
Well, before I get to that...
we don't have an awful lot of time, so I'm going to ask you to...
basically, I think in all the areas where it's been legalised, which is the States, there's been a 10 to 12-fold increase. In the Canada, there's been a 5 times increase. Whereas the...
In drug use, you're saying?
In cannabis, specifically. Okay. In Louis Moreira, the mayor of Porto, would indicate that you can't sell ice cream near a school, but you can actually be taking illicit drugs. And since 2019 to 2023, you've a doubling in the overdose rate in Portugal, together with the highest use of ketamine and cocaine in urine analysis is actually in Portugal. So decriminalisation over there basically is not necessarily working.
Sorry, decriminalisation is to keep people out of prison for their drug use. Can we all just be very clear on what decriminalisation is? I don't know what you mean by it, but you're a GP, right? Now, how good are you at your job? Because when somebody presents with addiction issues or any sort of substance use, are you saying that you can do your job and provide a healthcare service to them, or would you prefer they would rather go to Michael because he's better at helping people with addiction than you are?
Well, whether you decriminalise somebody or not doesn't treat the person. Basically, what we need here is education. We need prevention. We need to deal with the health issues. So, for example, what the Citizens' Assembly have indicated is we need a public health approach. That is correct. Now, how you do that, we still have to deal with.
Okay.
And that's what the 36 recommendations
Okay, let's see
are.
what the government's going to do. Kieran O'Donnell, where's the government on this?
The government on this is that we gave a commitment report for government that we'd set up a Citizens' Assembly on drugs. That's been established. They've come forward with, at the moment, 36 recommendations. This will be followed by a report completed by Paul Reid, the chair.
Okay, I don't need the procedural now.
Where we stand in it is very simple, that we will, when this comes to government, the government will refer this to an Oireachtas committee. The government itself will come back with a very considered and detailed response.
So you haven't any position on it right now?
Our position is that we very much are promoting a health-led approach as it is. And furthermore, if you look at the outcome of the recommendations across all the drug head areas, the members, the 99 members plus one, Paul Reid, voted there should be a comprehensive public-led approach in terms of dealing with addiction.
Can I just put you on, just on that point, that one point? We know that the local drug and alcohol task forces, these are the people that deal with in the most marginalised communities, with the most marginalised people, the kind of people that Len was talking about. We know their budgets have been absolutely slashed since the financial crash. We heard that there was more money coming towards this sector in the budget. And tonight, a few hours ago, those people from the drug and alcohol task forces were told there will be no additional funding, not a penny will they get out of that additional funding in the budget. Well, what does that say about the priorities of the government in relation to this?
4 million additional funding has been provided in this year's budget towards delivery of the national drug strategy. Furthermore, since this government came in, 26 million extra has gone in. We're spending upwards now of about 170 million a year in terms of dealing with drug addiction. What's come out of the Citizens' Assembly is it was made up of a very diverse group, which is representative of society. They've done a great body of work. We are very much committed as a government to prioritising what the Citizens' Assembly when the report comes to us, and very much looking at the recommendations they've made. And as I said, it's very interesting that when you look down through it, the one common thread that's coming through from the Citizens' Assembly recommendations yesterday is they want a comprehensive, health-led policy.
This is in circumstances where people are waiting 12 weeks for a residential bed right now. There's over 3,500 people waiting for a detox bed as of February 2021. And as I said before, deaths have risen from 431 in 2004 to 806 in 2020.
Yeah, and we have
it's not a good picture.
We have a problem with drugs, and I appreciate that. And really, like the points that were made by Eddie, Sarah, and was it Joan or was it Joan? Yeah. Joan, and like these are all points. This is why we're having this debate. This is why the Citizens' Assembly was established.
Okay, we have some people in our audience that want to go to people who have first-hand experience of this. Luke Loughlin, you're very welcome. Of course, GA fans will know you are a county player with Westmeath, and that's your mum there, Una, beside you. You have been public about your own battle with cocaine addiction. How did you get sucked into it?
It's like everything, just progressed over time. Started off with alcohol, and I obviously had mental health problems that I was never able to address or issue, and it just, as I said, progressed over time. I needed something stronger. And just when we were talking about it today, why I was doing it was because I probably wasn't able to deal with what was going on in my life, so I needed to get high or drunk to face the problems that I had. And the older I got, the more I could drink, the more I could sniff, the more money I had, the more access I had, like the more responsibility. So just kept going down a slippery slope, and that's basically how I got to where I ended up.
And what Sarah was telling us, Sarah Cassidy was telling us earlier about the situation in rural, like that you'd up every boring at every. Was that your sense of it?
Yeah, well, so I'm 28 now. Maybe about 10 years ago, it was around, but not as easy, or not to get, but like you can go to any pub now and you can get it so easy. It's literally like getting a bag of sweets. It's crazy, to be honest.
What is it, like social media?
Like Snapchat there, because I don't think it can be traced. Literally every second person's cousin is a drug dealer now, or has contacts to a coke dealer or something. So it's very easy got. And
you came to a very low ebb. It was actually a video, wasn't it, that sent you?
Telling Jen on the phone. Just before I went into a treatment centre, there's a video went around to me asleep at train tracks out in a rural pub in Westmeath. And I was obviously asleep, but God knows what was going through my head. But I was after being on a coke binge it had been like 2 months, but this has been 4 days without sleep. So God knows what was going on. People were obviously looking for me and everything, but that's just where I got to. That was my norm. I was so comfortable in the uncomfortable, and that's just where it brought me to.
Una, there beside you, I just like when you were watching all of this unfold. How were you dealing with that as a mother and not being able to step in?
Well, you don't deal with it. You try and cope every day with it. I to be fair, I didn't know how bad it was. Maybe I was ignorant or wanted to be ignorant to it. I didn't want to admit to how bad it got. You'd hear stories, rumours. He disappeared for weeks on end. You wouldn't know where he was, searching for him. The only time I had any comfort was when he was in the depths of depression and would come home and he would be in bed for a week. And then you could say, right, well, he's home tonight, or for the next couple of nights, until he kind of rallied himself up again to go again. Like, it's the hardest thing as a parent to watch. There's blame, there's guilt, there's anger, there's every emotion you can imagine. But I was totally ignorant to how easily it's got around Mullingar, rural Ireland, wherever.
I mean, you have 3 other sons, don't you? Were you worried, like when you realised what was going on here, did you worry that for your other boys?
Absolutely, yeah, most definitely. They probably never went out as much or were allowed go out or go anywhere as much as maybe the freedom that Luke had because of the way Luke was. Because I was just so fearful that they were going to be the same. I remember having a conversation with Adam, my other son, and he was like saying, "Ma, are you stupid?" He said, "It's out there everywhere." He said, "If you were to turn around a corner, it's there. They're offering it." So like, it's so scary.
When did you realise the depth of the trouble he was in?
When he gave me permission to go and seek help for him. We tried on numerous occasions, and you'd get so far and he'd back out and he'd disappear for days, and then he might be good for a week or 2 or a month or 2, and then it was he was just really low, really low. He tried to take his own life at one point, everything. So when he kind of said to me, "Ma'am, I need help badly," and I said, "Are you giving me permission to help you?" And he said, "Yeah." So I ran with it there and then.
Do you find it hard, Luke, to hear your mum?
I've heard it before, to be honest, on the last day when I was in the treatment centre, so after the 3 months I was feeling bulletproof again, whatever, and they made me do a Zoom with Mum, and she told me all that, and that fairly brought me back down to reality, because a couple of things they told me in there was, I think 7 people are directly affected by someone who suffers with addiction, and then another fact on that, I think half of the people that are in addiction end up relapsing straight away. So like, that is tough, but like, we've a great relationship now, thank God, and only for the support of my family and say the community around me where I'm from, God knows what could have happened, because as she said, I've sorted my crap out a few times before, but never to the extent that I did this time. Whereas she was saying I got good for a while, but I'd be just like codding people basically. So this time it was for real, thank God. So luckily I have the family I have and support.
I don't want to exaggerate the link with GAA because I know the GAA would say it's exaggerated and there isn't as much of it in, you know, in GAA circles as some people might suggest. But for sports people, is there a thing that, you know, you don't put on weight with cocaine, the hangover isn't as obvious? Like, is that part of it?
I wouldn't say that. I think it's just you train for so long with maybe abstinence from alcohol, and it's like, especially, I think the GA thing, like, you know, drink bans and all the crack, that when maybe you win something or you lose something, it could be a few months you've had a drink and it's just like, all right, it's a blow up nearly, like you just go party as hard as you can, you nearly deserve it. But I wouldn't say that there's less of a hangover. The fear and anxiety I got, especially towards the end after cocaine, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. Like, some of those belts of depression when I'd be in bed, like, I wouldn't be able to brush my teeth, I wouldn't be able to shower, just because my self-worth had been so low. Like, I remember times she'd be coming in to see if I was okay, and like, I'd be pretending to be asleep. Like, I'd be an adult, like, just pretending to be asleep so I didn't have to talk to her. And like, that's sad, really. There's serious problems there, but that's going on everywhere. Maybe not to that extent, but it does go on everywhere. Like,
can I ask you both? I'll ask you first, Una. Would you be in favour of decriminalising drugs?
Coming here, I would have said absolutely, you know, not. But listening to people's opinions, yeah, maybe so. Like, I wouldn't like to see him up the steps of the court or, you know, thrown in jail for his misdemeanours or whatever word you want to use for it. But something has to be done. And I suppose mental health and those health services have to start.
Yeah, you would have had the same view coming here, that you wouldn't be in favour of decriminalisation?
well, like, to be honest, if I was ever randomly searched in Mullingar on a night out, I definitely would have been, if that was the case, put in front of a court or whatever, like, because I had a lot of drugs on me. But coming here, like, I'm just of the opinion, whatever can help people get healthiest and well, I suppose, is what I'd say everyone here is trying to get. That's the end goal, I suppose. I don't really have much political views, but health and well-being is number one, and your health is your wealth, I guess. So.
More access to the centres. Like, we were very lucky the day.
Just because I play football for Westmeath.
Yeah, like we did get help from the GPA, which was
the
massive.
GPA,
we wouldn't have got it.
Players Association.
Yeah.
Did they pay for your...
They helped me with everything. Still to this day, anything I ever need, amazing.
Okay.
But for normal, everyday families like us, if we didn't have that access,
it would be very, very difficult.
You wouldn't get in.
Okay, thank you for that. I can't come to you for a second. I just want to bring in Gillian O'Donnell. I know that you have a particular view on decriminalisation. We'll come to that in a minute. But can you tell me your own story first? Because you were actually different from Luke. You were born into
addiction.
Addiction. You were addicted as a newborn.
As a newborn, both my parents were people that used drugs. I then was obviously born and social workers were involved, so I was technically born into the state. Kept going back home. Home was inner city town, St. Joseph Mansions, where the heroin epidemic was going on. My father died of a heroin overdose. He was the 5th registered heroin overdose on his death certificate. So, in and out. By the age of 11, I was on a young person's clinic, a methadone clinic.
At 11?
At 11, I was running from one end of the flats to the other, bringing drugs because there was 2 entrances. So obviously they'd get the juniors, the underage to do it, but the guards knew and, you know, they knew we were doing it as well. So we were targeted for that as well. So basically I was born into the stigma. The stigma carried on throughout my life. I, at the age of 5, went into care to Madonna House, where I was physically, mentally, emotionally, sexually abused for a period of nearly 10, 15 years. And then, obviously, I was in full-blown addiction while leaving care at the age of 16. The day I was 16, I was in residential. The day after I was 16, I was in my own accommodation. So all of a sudden, I've been brought up in an institution my whole life, and then I felt as if it was like me against the whole world. And technically it was, because I was judged, discriminated, stigmatised, dehumanised for what the policies had got wrong. You know, they were there to protect me and care for me, and they failed me miserably. Because they failed me miserably, I was traumatised. Addiction is now being recognised as a 90% trauma response. So I was self-soothing because no one cared to see whether I was okay. But yeah, I carried the stigma, the shame, the criminalisation for it. I was 18 years of age. The guards held back my charges till I was 18 and gave them to me when I was 18. I have gone on to college. I have a degree in social studies. I can't work as a social worker or a probation officer because of my charges going back 30 years. You know, how are people supposed to evolve and become drug-free when the whole system is designed to punish? You know, we have kids, we all have kids, and, you know, negative reinforcement isn't going to help our kids, you know, evolve through life, you know. But yet society feels that because people use drugs, that they don't have a voice, they don't have a say in the services, and, you know, it's all internal, so it's all being kept. So I was delighted to actually get to speak at the Citizens' Assembly and address the Citizens' Assembly on the lived and living experience panel, because I wanted them to hear the reality of it. Because, you know, I was made out to be the problem all my life. I was clearly I take ownership of my addiction, but that was a symptom. What was the cause? The cause was all these policies, you know, guards, social workers, everyone. The system keeps people that want to, you know, become drug-free and make great efforts to become drug-free. Like, I'm drug-free now, and I'm still dealing with criminality from 2017. I haven't been in trouble in 5 years, but these charges were held back. So how is someone supposed to evolve through life, you know, become drug-free, want to be a productive member of society, when society are keep pulling them back into the system?
OK. Thank you for sharing your story with us, Gillian. I just have a couple of minutes left, and I'll go to maybe the two of you. So, Michael, can I put Gillian's story there?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
She wasn't helped when she needed it.
She certainly wasn't. No, absolutely.
She's done
a remarkable job, there's no doubt. Just to clarify a couple of things that are, there's a myth building up about them. Nobody goes to prison for possession of drugs. Just let's get that clear. Secondly,
not true.
For possession,
it's actually blatantly not true.
What?
It's blatantly not true.
Nobody gets sentenced for possession of drugs.
I'm going to contradict you there.
Okay.
That's a barefaced lie.
For simple possession
of 2 bags of heroin for my own personal use. My children. I went to prison for 4 months. For 4 months, I had my own home, my own children. My children never came to Tulsa's, came to the attention of Tulsa. I went to court. I sat in front of a judge who knew my history, what I had gone through in this life. And I said to her, look, Your Honour, you put me into custody now. I'm going to be homeless when I get out, and my children are going to have to go into care. So she goes, where's your parents? I said, that's technically you, Your Honour. Straight away, she sentenced me to that 4 months. Now, the way I look at that is, look at the expense to the taxpayers that cost. Me in prison, me coming out of prison, then being homeless. So then, therefore, the taxpayers had to pay for me to be in accommodation, pay for my children to be in the care of Tulsa, and then for the generational trauma to continue. Because now I have children that have aged out with the same trauma that I have that I have endured 30 years ago, very recently. So the policies haven't changed, and people are definitely going to prison for small possession of drugs. They're being targeted.
Okay.
They're being targeted.
Okay. I only very
quickly. That was an exceptional circumstance. I can only presume the judge was doing that because of your circumstances. For cannabis, you cannot in the first 3 offences go to prison.
That's cannabis.
Hold on a second. And no judge, if you look at Gillian Hussey, if you look at Maura Roach, if you look at any of them, no judges send people for possession.
Okay,
there's a probation service report.
Linda shaking her head there. I just let you
really
respond to that very quickly.
You can still end up in front of a judge, you can still get suspended sentence, you can still get probation reports, you still end up for a whole spectrum of reasons within the justice system. What's really important here, what Gillian is talking about, when she mentioned stigma so many times, and thankfully what the Citizens' Assembly overwhelmingly has voted for is the end of stigmatisation. Because Gillian's not a criminal, Luke's not a criminal, people are not criminals for medicating years and years of trauma. Like, it's just not. They're not criminals, and I don't know how anybody can stand over a system where we say that people that need support, care, compassion and destigmatisation should ever have to be stopped, searched, given a charge sheet, brought to a guard station and put in front of a court, no matter what the judge says on the day.
Okay. I'm sorry, Gillian, I'm actually...
As children, and they're also being taken. I work for a human organisation called ISHCA. We are underfunded, understaffed. We haven't even got a proper premises. Why? Because we're people that use drugs. The policies feel that we don't deserve a voice, so therefore that's why we're so underfunded. You know, so we're still now, our voices are being taken away from us in adulthood as well as childhood.
Gillian, I hope you feel we gave you some voice tonight. On that, we're going to have to leave this part of the debate. We'll have a quick break, but afterwards I will be asking, should we be able to buy cannabis over the counter like cigarettes and alcohol? Welcome back. Now, should we treat cannabis differently to other controlled drugs? A proposal to legalise and regulate cannabis, effectively to treat it like alcohol and cigarettes, was rejected by the narrowest of margins at the Citizens' Assembly, so it remains very much a live issue. Graham, can I bring you in? Because you're with Crown, which have been campaigning to legalise cannabis for many years. Why?
I truly believe we should regulate it like alcohol. I know some people think it might be a dangerous drug. It's less dangerous than alcohol. We've decided to deal with the dangers of alcohol in a regulated market. I also feel a comprehensive health-led approach was voted for at the Assembly. Germany is also planning to do the same. Their comprehensive health-led approach includes home growing of cannabis and cannabis social clubs, as there are harms to cannabis users currently in Ireland that do not just exist from the drug itself. For example, there are synthetic cannabinoids in the market, which are left in the market, which have caused deaths in the EU, and I feel will cause a death in Ireland unless this is resolved. The other thing I'd like to bring up is, I know there's some talk of the states. Cannabis is not federally legalised in the states. So some states have it, other states don't. It's a mess. They can't do banking. It's not a comprehensive system. Canada has done full legalisation. 60% of the market in Canada has moved from the black market into the clear market. And I would just like to correct what Michael said, that there is no system where drugs are sold in Ireland legally. There currently is. It's called alcohol, and there's hundreds of them around the place. If we were to make alcohol illegal, like we've done with cannabis, how would that look? Would be my question.
OK, thank you for that. Amy?
I'd just like to agree with Graham. I'm a part of the LGBT community, and it's already a scary place to be in Dublin, being queer, and having to go to purchase cannabis off of young fellas who might do something harmful to you isn't genuinely safe. So I agree with what Graham says about having a safe place to go and purchase your cannabis. They do exist. They exist in Thailand, just recently decriminalised last year. We have places in Canada, America. Sorry, I'm very nervous. Spain, Portugal. So there's many places in the world coming up now who are regulating and legalising cannabis. So I just don't see why we in Ireland can't do it when there's evidence-based out there around the world where it does work and it does happen. So I just think it's not fair for people like me or anybody. It's not fair for anybody to have to go and buy cannabis off people where it's not safe. You won't know what's in it. You don't know what's in it. How are we to know? Why can't we just purchase off Irish growers who can provide to the cannabis social clubs? Like we have in Spain, there's Spanish growers who are consuming to their social clubs. So it's working in some places in the world. Okay. So I can't see why it won't work here if we fund the mental health services, have the right funding, have the right approach from the very beginning. Like Lynn said about it, 3 years in in Portland, it's 3 years there, so we can take something from that and learn, OK, from the start, we need to be funding from the very get-go. OK. Sorry.
OK, sorry, Amy, we're very tight on time. Frank. You disagree?
Yeah, well, as a mental health social worker and most of my colleagues who work in psychiatry, we know that 30% of those young people who had a history of using cannabis will end up with psychosis or schizophrenia, which is a devastating illness. So really my message to the panel is, if we legalise cannabis, are we giving a mixed message to our young people?
OK. Can I put this to you, Ray Wally?
Well, certainly the Irish College of Practitioners only last week, representing 4,200 members, due to the problems with cannabis manifesting in our waiting rooms on a regular basis throughout the country. It's a unique drug that's not just in deprivation areas, it's in all waiting rooms throughout the country. Came out with a very strong message that this is a dangerous drug with serious public health concerns. They specifically discourage use in high-risk populations, the youth, those with a personal and family history of mental health, pregnant women and women who are breastfeeding.
Can I just say, you could say all of that thing for alcohol?
you can do. And basically, certainly, but in the states that in America where it has been legalised, you've had a 10 to 12-fold increase. In Canada, where you've had it legalised, you have a 5-fold increase. And we're now starting to see the significant harms coming through other than mental health. So study published within the last 2 to 3 weeks showing that when you burn cannabis, it causes the same effects as cigarette tobacco in regard to 60% chance of hardening of the arteries.
Yeah, but again, you're not arguing for the prohibition of cigarettes or alcohol.
So legalisation in America has increased the use of 10 to 12-fold. 20% of people develop cannabis use disorder, so 20% of a higher figure is a higher figure. In Canada, which is for a shorter period, or in the last 5 years, it has increased 6-fold. So 20% of that higher figure is a higher figure.
What about Amy's point that you're driving people into the arms of dangerous people that they don't want to be
in
doing
those jurisdictions, again, there has not been a reduction in the sale in the black market, and that is in America. Basically, don't agree.
No, you can't just not agree. It has to be statistically correct and based on research. The statistic on psychosis, I'd also like you to cite your research for your statistic on psychosis, right? Because they're not accurate and they're well disputed. And the thing is, you have a cannabis, even for the cohort. Even for the cohort.
You can talk over people if you want.
Sorry, but we were actually on the panel. You weren't actually brought back in, so I'm not speaking over you. I'm actually responding to you. So, the psychosis, you have psychosis, right? Say you are one of those people that do end up with dual diagnosis, that do end up with psychosis. You want to actually harm them more by sending them to prison?
If you decriminalise, no one's going to prison.
That's what you want to do. You want to send them to prison.
What actually happens?
You want to send them to court and you want to send them to prison.
Can I make a point?
Prohibition hasn't worked.
Incarceration does not solve any cannabis problem. What we are talking about, is legalisation. Legalisation with more. But specific to your study, the study was done by the Danish, published in the Journal of American Medical Association.
Because Canada are saying it has had a complete shift.
This is in JAMA within the last 6 months. Within the last 6 months, indicating 30% basically association with schizophrenia, and they have a database going back decades.
Okay, can I bring you in, Michael O'Sullivan?
How do you propose telling the criminals that they can't grow hash and the Moroccans that they can't export cannabis resin? You know, are you real here, folks? Will you take cannabis out of the black market? No, you won't.
Reduce it 60% in 5 years in Canada. 60% reduction. That's a government study done in Canada. 60% reduction.
Let me tell you something.
You need to compete against the black market. That's what we need to do.
Okay.
It hasn't worked. Drug use is at its highest rate you've ever heard. Walk through the city centre and tell me this policy works.
Sorry, I'm not saying the policy works completely. You said that earlier. Sorry, I'm saying we have a good system if it's resourced, if it's financially resourced.
That's what I'm saying. Please let Michael O'Sullivan respond.
One thing that's been overlooked here. Somebody comes to court, there's a probation service report, and they make a recommendation, and by and large, they will recommend that they seek treatment. And somebody who seeks treatment doesn't get a sentence. I'm talking about supply here. So the probation and welfare service are the safety net between the person getting arrested and the person going to prison. And that is the way the system operates. If there's not enough probation officers, if there isn't enough treatment places, it then starts to get shaky.
Can I ask Kieran O'Donnell, would there be...
In 2019, we're supposed to be having a health-led approach, but now the punitive system is
actually, Gillian,
at maximum capacity. So clearly it's not working.
I was just going to ask the minister this one, because the government agreed this system, this three strikes health-led approach in 2019, and never enacted it.
Well, it has taken a lot longer than the rule of light. I accept that. In 2019, COVID came, but it's been given absolute priority at the moment. We're rolling out 9 addiction counsellors in the 9 CHO areas in the country, and really there's all the collaborative approach now between the Department of Health, the Justice, and also in Garda Síochána to have this, I suppose, the health diversion in place and that treatment in place by the end of this year.
There's no health-led approach with the justice system. Can I just say that?
You can't just say because I need to get the ministers. Can I just put one thing to you?
would have
Can I
looked
ask
for
you
legislation,
about,
but it's not going to be administrative.
Can we go back to legalisation of cannabis? Can I just say, did that give you a bit of a fright, the Citizens' Assembly coming so close to voting for the legalisation of cannabis?
Well, they voted across a range of drugs, and
just respond to that question.
On
please.
that particular one, well, there are widely held views, but we as a government, the Citizens' Assembly will produce a report which we will take. We have to take into account a range of views, including the medical profession as well. And both the ICGP and the College of Psychiatrists in Ireland have their issues with it. We as government will look at all sides, but really what we're awaiting now is the Citizens' Assembly report.
OK, you've had your hand up for a while, yes?
Thanks very much. Just to go back to the issue of trauma again and distress, if we have a health-led approach, do the panel believe that everyone in this area, from doctors to psychiatrists to medical social workers to probation to judges to guards, need training in what trauma is and what it does to people? As head of the drug squad, do you think your officers were trained well?
I think they're very well trained. Yeah.
They know all about this. They know what it does to the nervous system.
What I'm saying is, and they certainly have been very well trained in it. I'm not saying they're experts on it, but they have received training, yes.
All of them?
Okay. I don't know if they all have, but...
OK, I just have, Eddie, we've 30 seconds left, Eddie.
One simple thing that I think Lynn said that we almost missed. Decrim is not about reducing the number of people who use drugs. It's about reducing the amount of harm that impacts on them. Of course, the number of people in Lisbon and Canada, and I think there will be a 10% increase, but what it does, it takes out that additional harm that putting people in prison, give them a permanent record forever, which limits the number of jobs they can get, where they can travel, their education. It just does away with that. It's not going to reduce the number of people using drugs. Good health promotion will do that. Good health promotion will do that.
Darcy, many thanks for that. And many thanks to all of you and to my panel. If you've been affected by any of the issues discussed tonight, go to rt.ie/helplines. As I said, that's all from the Upfront team. Thanks to all my guests, to you, the audience here and at home. And if you want to join our studio audience, go to rt.ie/upfront. We'll be back to this, no doubt. But for now, thank you all and good night.